Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Leah Panther, an assistant professor of literacy education at Mercer University's Atlanta campus. Dr. Vaughn?
I am Dr. Michelle Vaughn, and I am also a literacy professor here at Mercer University, but I teach on the traditional campus with our traditional students, but I'm also very fortunate to teach our non-traditional students.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Felicia Baden. I'm an assistant professor of elementary education, and I primarily teach our students who are considered post-traditional students at our regional academic centers.
So as we represent a range of literacy faculty members on very different campuses throughout the state of Georgia, we have that shared focus of literacy education. However, how did this particular project come to be, or how did each of us come to this project? I know for me, it began when I was doing my doctoral studies, and I had the pleasure and privilege to be a graduate research assistant working with a lot of faculty who are in this structured poster session, including Dr. Hollins. And a part of that work was seeing the impact of how LTIP, learning, teaching as an interpretive process, could create this very cohesive and coherent framework for framing teacher education. And I also saw the immediate impact on individual teacher educators and their students within the classroom, the ways they were designing their courses, and the ways that teacher candidates were able to talk about education in really complex and nuanced ways. So I brought that knowledge and that expectation of how to design a fully coherent and cohesive teacher education program with me to Mercer. Dr. Baden, how did you become a part of this project?
So a few years ago, I was a part of our fieldwork committee. And so one of the charges at that time of the fieldwork committee was to redevelop the journal prompts that our students who were participating in their initial field experiences did. And this was basically the students doing active observation and responding to prompts. And so I worked alongside Dr. Panther in redeveloping those journal prompts. And then also my research focuses on teaching for social justice and equity. And so one of the reasons why I highly value and appreciate the LTIP model is because it has that lens towards social justice and equity, which I think has always been needed in education, but particularly now in the sociocultural context that we find ourselves in.
Dr. Vaughn?
Yeah, so as I stated earlier, obviously I teach literacy courses in the undergrad and graduate program, and I'm also the coordinator for the reading endorsement program. The reading endorsement program needed a complete overhaul, and it just so happened that Dr. Panther is in the process of creating a program. Curriculum is that's what she loves to do, thankfully. It's not something that I'm as passionate about as she is, but she introduced us to Hollins, and we quickly saw that, okay, Hollins is needed in this in this creation of this new or revamp of this program. I've been teaching in the reading endorsement program since starting at Mercer. This is my 9th year, and there's always been a void. There's always been a space that needed to be filled, and but I didn't know what it was exactly until a few years ago when Dr. Panther and I started talking through what could be, and if we could create our utopian, for lack of a better word, great program, what would it look like? And so we started to fill in some of those spaces that needed to be filled. So that's how I came on this project, just to fill a void that was needed in our reading endorsement program, which has now led into filling a void in our undergrad program as well.
So it's interesting to just hear about the evolution of LTIP within Mercer's teacher education program. So that it started as rethinking all of our field experience assignments, grew to an entire program of the reading endorsement, and now it's growing to design an entire education specialist program for literacy specialists. So it keeps growing in how it's helping us to conceptualize not just individual assignments or individual courses, but entire programs. So as we continue to work towards that cohesiveness across all of our campuses and programs. So thinking about this poster and all the potential audience members who might be here attending AERA, what are some maybe aspects of the poster you'd like to point out or lead particular audience members to? For example, I would really recommend if someone is interested in experimenting with LTIP and seeing the impact that it has on the ways their students are thinking about teaching and learning, but maybe doesn't have the power or the ability or the voice to make it a whole programmatic change, I would direct their attention to the second table in finding two to see how they can start making small changes even within their own courses as a way of collecting data and student documents, as a way to maybe encourage other colleagues within their programs to see the value of what the LTIP model brings to teacher education and teacher preparation. Dr. Vaughn, what would you recommend for some of our audience members?
So as you can tell, Dr. Panther again went straight to the curriculum. So that's what really drives like her thinking. I respect the curriculum. I know that's what we're supposed to really follow. However, rubber meets the road in my headspace. Like I want to see how the rubber is going to meet the road, but more importantly, I want to see that after impacts. Is that even a phrase that I can use? I think everybody understands what I'm saying there, but I want to know what the students are walking away with. Like, how did it impact them positively or negatively? So if you look at the poster, you can really see specifically what our students, how they felt, how they're going to use this new knowledge in their courses moving forward. So under findings, in the center of the poster, you can see a specific student feedback that we were able to get. But we also learn from this feedback, as we're supposed to do, but it is guiding us to what other changes can we make moving forward, just so that learning capacity, that learning is really magnified with the students, but with us too, because we have to know that really gauges us. It really points us to what we need to do next to change or to keep the same or to chunk out or just how to move forward, period, with the students.
Which, can I just say, I love that that's your response too, because focusing on how learners respond to instruction is at the heart of the LTIP model, right? And the teaching.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that that is so a part of the way that you're thinking about the data as well. Dr. Baden?
Yes, very great points thus far. And just to add to that, I would strongly suggest, if you're considering how this model may look, in your individual course within a program, I would just say get a deep understanding of what the LTIP model consists of. And so I would highly recommend reading Teacher Preparation for Quality Teaching, It's a Hollins article that was published in 2011, but it gives you a very substantial understanding of what learning teaching as an interpretive process is. And it helps you to start to think about what you may already be doing in your current practices and how you're supporting teacher candidates through this process. And then also, where are some gaps, what's missing in your application of this framework.
And that actually leads really nicely into the last question I wanted to pose, Dr. Baden, is this idea of what are those next steps? What do we recommend either for ourselves or for other teacher educators who are interested in taking up LTIP within their own work? So you mentioned that within the folder, there will be the article available, but what other resources do you recommend for ourselves or for other teacher educators who want to continue this work?
I would just say also we mentioned LTIP, but we haven't really discussed a lot about linguistic justice. I think you have to basically gain a substantial understanding of what linguistic justice is, what it means, and why it's important. So we speak on our poster about just the linguistic diversity that exists throughout the state of Georgia. And we, as educators, teacher educators, just knowing how increasingly diverse our classrooms are becoming, it's very important to know that with that also comes linguistic diversity as well. And how are we going to honor the multiple dialects and languages that our students bring to the classroom? And so I think, to educate yourself on what linguistic justice is first and foremost. And then also consider ways that how that might show up in your teaching. For example, one of the things that I'm in the process of doing is I'm developing a book list of books that feature what's considered Black English. In some spaces, it's been called African American Vernacular English or Ebonics, but I like to refer to it as Black English. And so anyway, I'm intentionally selecting those children's books to be able to read and to share with youth and to discuss, and also use as mentor text. Okay, this is a practical example of how you can highlight the diverse languages that may or may not exist in your classroom, but we know they exist in the world. And so identifying those resources and educating yourself, and then also using those resources with your pre-service teachers and encouraging them to use these resources with their students as well as children's literature.
Can I add something about next steps real quick? The reflection piece, sometimes we think we reflect, but do we? And so that's what I really want to focus on moving forward with, especially, well, with the undergrad students too. But they're just getting into the whole reflective process. So if we can go ahead and teach them how to do it effectively, okay, yay, we're winning. However, we have a lot of in-service teachers that go through the motions because they're told to, because of whatever their evaluation system tells them to do. But are they really metacognitively going through the reflective process and answering the questions of, okay, why did I do this? What am I going to do next? And so that really falls in line with the LTIP framework. And so, but we've got to teach and hold our in-service teachers accountable for that whole reflective process. And the linguistic justice piece, it's not being looked at as a huge component as I think it should be. But we do know when our students come to us, they do speak a variety of languages, not only first or second languages, but within one language, there are different dialects within that language. So how do we reach those students? How do we prepare our in-service and our pre-service teachers to recognize that, to understand their own biases when it comes to recognizing and how they're going to move forward with those students? So those are my next steps with my students.
Wow, that's so important. I'm glad you raised that point, Michelle. And that is, recognizing your own biases, because one of the things that sometimes we forget as educators, or may not feel comfortable acknowledging, is the fact that we all carry biases and assumptions. So checking in with yourself to see, okay, what are my biases? What are my biases as it relates to language and literacy, right? And that's the only way that we'll be able to do what Michelle just suggested, and that is supporting our students in that deep reflective, process. And one more thing I wanted to mention regarding literature on linguistic justice. I know I mentioned the children's books, but I think obviously equally as important would be the professional literature for the educators. So there's one particular book that I would like to recommend in relation to linguistic justice, specifically as it relates to Black language. It's Linguistic Justice, Black Language, Literacy, Identity, and Pedagogy. It's by April Baker Bales. That's one that I would highly recommend. Are there any others that you would recommend, Dr. Panther?
About 20 or so, but which I think, for example, Smitherin is just foundational in the field. If we look into ratiolinguistics and sociolinguistics as some of the foundational readings, Samuel Leem, Nelson Flora has so many that are really feeding our understanding of what linguistic justice means. And to Michelle's point on not only equipping our teacher candidates, but also us as teacher educators to reflect in meaningful ways, that's where those LTIP epistemic practices have been so impactful, having them actually evaluate the thinking and the theoretical lenses that they're looking for as they're viewing student responses. So it's not just viewing them through personal experiences, but also through what are the different theoretical lenses we can apply to this? What are the different socio and cultural contexts that we need to take into consideration as we're examining student responses? And that's work for us to do as well. And so I love that within our context, it's very literacy specific. And we've identified as our literacy program and our literacy teacher education program that linguistic justice is going to be our kind of guiding theoretical framework for this. And it is never in tension with LTIP. Instead, they complement one another. So for other teacher education programs with different contexts and different needs and different communities that they're serving, there are other theoretical and conceptual lenses that can complement LTIP in order to make it context specific for your communities and for your teacher educators. So we will provide so many resources within that folder for those of you that are continuing to do this work. And we thank you for taking an interest and hopefully reaching out with additional questions as you have them. But thank you for being here.
Thank you.